Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 1 of the Pro American Late Model Series. Tonight, we are heading out to the Langley Speedway for 225 laps here tonight, and let me tell you what, race fans, I think this is going to be a very exciting, maybe somewhat hectic race, because here at the Langley Speedway, it's only clocking in at about 0.39 miles in length or 0.63 kilometers in length, making it arguably one of the smallest tracks on the schedule here tonight. And currently, looking at our qualifying results as they start to finish that up, it looks like we have 14 drivers that have set a time and 16 drivers that have their name on the attendance list. Whether or not we see those remaining two come out to set a qualifying time in these final 30 seconds remains to be seen, but regardless, this is going to be a very tight track with a whole lot of close racing. So better hold on to your hats if you're out in the stands, because things are going to be a little bit crazy. And it's always, like I like to point out when we come to this track, it's a little fitting that there's such a hectic and close quarters racetrack right across the street from a NASA research center. Sometimes, just sometimes, when we take race cars out to this speedway, we sometimes like to show NASA a little bit of how it's done. That said, qualifying is officially done and in the books, so let's take it down trackside and get a quick look at our starting lineup here tonight. Starting on the front row here tonight for our first heat race of the evening, that's going to be the 27 of Gerard Lawrence. To his outside in the number 9 machine, that's going to be Joshua Dube for Hale Trailer. Back in the third position, going to be the number 85 of Brandon Kiger, who won his respective heat race last week at Thompson Speedway. In the fourth position is going to be the number 45 of Mike Sukup out of Florida. And following behind them in row number 3, going to be the 28 of Jason Branch for 4X Racing, followed by his teammate just outside of him in the number 2 of Ryan Brancheau. Back in the fourth row, going to be that 6 machine in 7th place of Tommy Mitchell. And finally, rounding out the field, going to be the number 63 of Joe Campbell for this first heat race of the evening. That said, race fans, it does look like we have a grand total of 16 entrants in this race, and it looks like Ryan Brancheau actually not going to make the field for this heat race, so 100% for certain everyone in these heat races will be making the main event, so no risk of elimination for these drivers, but that's not going to make this racing any less exciting, because let's be honest, race fans, sometimes qualifying position can be a huge deal, and if you want to start at the front of this race, you got to win your heat race. That said, the pace car is off. We're going to be going green flag racing here at the Langley Speedway for heat race number 1. Gerard Lawrence off to a pretty solid lead, and immediately the number 9 machine is around. That's going to be Joshua Dube spinning out on his very first corner, make that actually second corner of the heat race with only 2 laps, or not 2 laps, 2 corners completed, so immediately going to be caution out on the speedway. Let's see if we can't take a look back here and see what happened to Joshua Dube. Currently looking down at that number 9 machine on the outside of this restart, heading down into turn number 1. Everything's looking fine and dory, and just a little bit of contact from that number 85 machine, and that's going to cause a whole checkup across the field. The 63 is getting damaged. Pretty much everyone stuck behind them had a little bit of damage done to their race cars. Let's take a quick look back at that again. So 85 of Brandon Kiger drifts up just a little bit, gets into the left rear of the 9. That's going to collect the 28, the 63, and the 6 manages to get through it just fine. That 6 of Timmy Mitchell is A-okay, but even then a whole lot of trouble very early on in this heat race. So we will have to see how that shakes things up for these drivers. Caution laps I believe, do not count in heat races. We are having them count down on the ticker, but that could just be an error. As you can see, it looks like there is a little bit of difficulty with the scoring here. Let's see if we can't get that resolved real quick. While we are under this caution, take a quick look and see if we can't get these tickers calibrated correctly. Everyone does have some convenient iRacing branded timing and scoring devices inside of these late model stock cars, so hopefully we can get things looking correctly now here. Sure enough, now it's looking correct. Gerard Lawrence still in the race lead as we get ready to take the pace car back off the speedway here. Ryan Brancho still scored 3 laps down for not making the race, but otherwise everyone is still on the lead lap, and the green flag is back up in the air. Let's see if we can't try this one again. Gerard Lawrence having a great run down into turn number 1, but still side by side for second. That 45 of Mike Sukup going to have to check up just a little bit and concede the position to Jason Branch, and it looks like there's might be trouble. That's the 6 car off the speedway. That's going to be Tommy Mitchell going way off the track there. No caution is going to be coming out there, and sure enough, caution laps do not count, so I was correct on that. That was an error with the ticker. Everything is looking good around the speedway. Tommy Mitchell managed to get his car pointed in the right direction. Mike Sukup looking to try and get around that 28 of Jason Branch, really trying to get the nose down in there. Not getting the tires below the apron, which was something we saw that some drivers attempted to do back at Thompson Speedway, to a little bit of mixed results. But it looks like, oh, the caution flag is out. That's going to be the 85 of Brandon Kiger around. Brandon Kiger off the speedway. That's going to be our second caution of this heat race. So let's see if we can't take a look back here and see what happened to that number 85 entry. Sure enough, heading down into turn number 2, and it looks like he just got loose and maybe had a little bit of undercarriage damage from those massive bumps, but otherwise he's got the car pointed back around. But the caution flag is going to come out for the driver of that number 85 for that little bit of a self spin there. It looks like he is going to pull it down onto pit road, so potentially a bit of damage on that number 85 machine. Going back up to our official heat race scoring, though, Gerard Lawrence still out in front in that number 27 machine, followed by Jason Branch in the 28, who is up 3 positions from where he qualified. So Jason having the heat race work out exactly how he wants it to do, but he's not even our biggest mover so far tonight. Joe Campbell in that number 63 machine is actually the most improved driver so far in that number 63. He is up 4 positions from where he qualified, so definitely some good runs going on for these drivers. As we start stacking them up and getting ready to go racing again, we will have to see just what Jason Branch and Mike Sukup might have in store for our race leader of Gerard Lawrence, or if Gerard is going to sail away with this heat race and clean sweep every single lap. That said, lights are off on the iRacing.com safety car, so we are going to try this thing one more time. Gonna be heading down into turn number 2 here. Then once we head down the backstretch and the pace car pulls itself off, we should be good to go. All 7 cars still out on the speedway, all 7 cars still on the lead lap. So we will have to see just what happens. Pace car is off. We are going to be going green flag racing yet again. Lawrence off to a pretty solid start. That 45 looking below the 28, almost making contact a little bit down on the apron there, but eventually conceding the position to Branch. And back in the back, another spin. That's Joe Campbell around and almost sent down into pit lane, along with contact for Mitchell and also the 85 of Brandon Kiger. So 3 cautions now out on the speedway in this first heat race. Let's see if we can't take a look back and see what happened there to these late model drivers. Currently looking at that number 63. Just a little bit of a love tap behind from the 9. That's going to collect the 6. And the 85 trying to swerve to avoid, also going to be making contact with the 6. So whole lot of beat up late models here tonight, race fans. Currently still on our first heat race, and that's going to be 3 cautions so far, all for relatively minor incidents. We do have a couple of cars around the track that are pretty banged and beat up, but despite that, everyone is still on the lead lap. No one has had damage that has ended their heat race, so still plenty of opportunity for these drivers to try and improve their positions just a little bit. Once we go green flag racing yet again, we will have to see if Gerard Lawrence is still going to be able to hang on to this heat race in that number 27 late model stock car. 27 and 28 side by side on this restart. So once we come around this one final time, this should be turning off the lights on the iRacing.com pace car. Sure enough, the lights are out, so we're going to be trying this one more time, race fans. We do have about 6 laps in the books here, so we have passed the halfway point for this heat race. We will have to see just what is in store for Mr. Gerard Lawrence. Oh, and scratch that, the lights are back on the iRacing.com pace car. They're saying we're going to send him around at least one more time. Not ready to go green just quite yet. It looks like potentially race control has ordered for a single file restart. That does look like that might be just what happened. Oh, actually, yep, single file restart on this final restart. Let's see what these drivers can do, race fans. Just a couple of laps left in this heat race. Of course, caution laps do not count. And the iRacing.com pace car is going to head back down to the safety of pit lane. Green flag up in the air, single file restart. Naturally, that's going to give Gerard Lawrence even greater of a start there. Little bit spread out throughout the field, but Jason Branch and Mike Sukup right back to back with each other. Only 4 laps left to go. And Kiger's down on pit lane, the 9 and the 63 touched coming down the straightaway. Both drivers having a bit of damage to their late model stock cars, and Joshua Dubin, that 9, is going to make the pass on Joe Campbell, but there was a little bit of nudging necessary to make the pass happen. Looks like everyone, for the most part, has gotten themselves sorted out here. Currently the closest battle on the speedway here between Branch in the 28 and Sukup in the 45. 2 laps to go remaining in this heat race. Lawrence is kind of sailing away with it, so we will have to see what he can do. And it looks like Tommy Mitchell might be having a little bit of trouble. He just went up on the high side and let those 2 cars by. White flag up in the air. We're going to make that the checkered flag this time by. And Gerard Lawrence is going to be the winner of your first heat race. And a little bit of a drift through turn 1 and 2. He's got to collect some style points for that one, race fans. That was pretty cool to see, quite honestly. And maybe a little bit of an incident at the end of the heat race, but it happens. But that is enough of that for heat race number 1. Let's take it down trackside and take a look at heat race number 2. Starting out on the pole for our second heat race, going to be the 12 of Kenny Tripp, our 2-time winner so far this season. Picked up both race wins so far back at the Thompson Speedway and the Richland Raceway. After that, in P number 2, going to be John Friley in the 126. Back in third place going to be Jonathan Emerson in the 23 entry, followed by Will Salamone in the 72, back in P number 4. Fifth place going to go to another 4X Racing driver, and that's going to be the number 17 of Casey Duncan. In sixth place going to be Art Hendren in the 37 machine, followed by Johnny B in the 26, back in P7. Finally, back in that number 55 late model is going to be rounding out our field. That's going to be Albert Hewins back into P number 8 here tonight, race fans. So, going to be 15 cars making the main event, as we did have one driver unable to make his heat race and also did not set a qualifying lap. So, definitely looks like he's already packed it up and headed home for the evening. But still one more heat race left to do between these 8 drivers you see here. Kenny Tripp, John Tandy going to be the front row, and once we make this final pass around the speedway, the pace car is going to be off, and this will be the start of our second 10-lap shootout. Of course, this is going to be determining the outside row for our main event, with the original heat race we did just a few moments ago determining the inside line. But pace car's off, green flag is up in the air. Pretty solid start all around. The 17 of Casey Duncan going down a little bit low there, but everyone managing to keep their cars pointed in the right direction, which is always great to see, especially on these cold tires. On initial restarts can be a little bit of trouble, but it looks like everyone is navigating their way around the speedway fairly well tonight. Casey Duncan going pretty low through these corners, going a bit down onto the apron, but it seems to be working out for him for the most part. He is successfully holding off that number 72 of Will Salamone just behind him, but he still has 8 laps left to try and hang on to this position or try and get further up in the front. Just in front of him is going to be John Friley in that 126, who did lose a position on that initial restart. It can definitely be very difficult to make initial starts work on the outside line, but John Friley's still up in the top 3 in that number 126 entry. Will Salamone, the 72, getting a little loose coming out of 4 there. That's going to cost him just a little bit on his attempt to try and get around Casey Duncan, but still keeping that car pointed in the right direction. And once the main event rolls around, there is going to be time for these tires to cool back down. So a little bit of a slide like that, not a huge deal here in the heat race, but sure enough, I say that, now he's catching up to Casey Duncan, closing the gap quite handily, down to 0.2 of a second here. Trying to see if he can't find a way to wedge the nose of that 72 Looney Tunes entry under the 17, and he might just try and go for it here into turn number 3. Down on the apron, trying to get around that number 17 is not going to work. Casey Duncan is going to hold on to the position here. It looks like Will Salamone going to lose a bit of speed on corner entry there, so let's take a quick look back up at the front, where we have the number 12 and number 23 of Kenny Tripp and Jonathan Emerson respectively. These 2 drivers driving matching paint schemes, both for the Hale Tractor Company, and both of them putting on a very solid run here as the white flag is going to fly. One last trip around the speedway, one last opportunity for Jonathan Emerson to try and see if he can't get around Kenny Tripp. Sure enough, heading into turn 3 and coming out of turn number 4, Kenny Tripp going to lose it almost coming across the finish line there, but he is going to maybe also collect some style points for that drift. These drivers really are trying to show off just a little bit. I suppose you can't exactly do a burnout after a heat race, which makes sense. So, bit of a sick drift through turns 1 and 2. All the style points you need here tonight, race fans. But now we get to sit back, relax, and just hang out for quite literally a minute as these drivers get a little bit of a time to catch their breath before the official start of this race. Gonna be a little bit of a quick warm-up just to make sure everything under the hood of these late models is how they want it to be, and do a little bit of quick testing and tuning, make sure the tires are at their proper temperatures, and then we will be ready for our 225 lap main event for round number 3 of the Pro American Late Model Series. Currently looking here at Johnny B in that number 26 machine. Let's actually take a moment to ride on board with this driver and get a quick look at what these drivers are experiencing around this speedway. And sure enough, just like that, the warm-up already in the books. Just a quick little moment for drivers to catch their breath, take any sips of their drinks, and make sure they are 100% ready to go for this 225 lap main event. So let's take a quick look at our official starting lineup now that all these heat races are down in the books. Starting out on the pole tonight in that number 27 machine is going to be Mr. Gerard Lawrence, followed by two-time winner Kenny Tripp in the 12 machine to his outside. Back in row number 3, going to be the 28 U.S. Navy entry of Jason Branch for 4X Racing, followed by Jonathan Emerson in the 23 in P number 4. Back in row number 3, in the 5th position, going to be that 45 of Mike Sukup, followed by John Friley in the number 126 in P number 6. Back in 7th place, going to be Ryan Branchot in that number 2 for 4X Racing with his teammate of Casey Duncan in the 17 to his outside, back in the 8th position. 9th place, going to go to the number 9 of Joshua Dube, with 10th place going back to the 72 of Will Salamone. 11th place going to be the number 63 of Joe Campbell, followed by Art Hendren in the number 37, back in P number 12. In 13th, going to be the 6th entry of Tommy Mitchell, followed by the 55 of Albert Hewins. Then finally, back in 15th, going to be the 85 of Brandon Kiger, and the number 26 of Johnny V, rounding out the field here tonight. So that is your 16 car official grid here tonight. Does look like we did actually get 16 drivers to make the main after all. Of course, those of them that were unable to set a qualifying time or compete in the heat races will be starting back in the back of the field. But 225 laps is a whole lot of time for these drivers to try and make up positions here tonight. And now that the iRacing.com pace car is off, let's get this party started, race fans. It's the Langley 225 at Langley Speedway. Surprisingly enough, actually a very good start by the outside line, side by side down through turns 1, and the 12 machine gonna lose it actually in front of the field, and that's gonna cause a whole lot of pile up early on in this race. The 12 machine of Kenny Tripp was making a pretty solid run here tonight, but unfortunately could not make it stick on that outside line, and he was unfortunately going to be spun out by that. But let's see if we can't take a look back at what happened to Mr. Kenny Tripp here. Gonna actually be using our iRacing.com chopper camera here to get a top-down view of this thing. 12 car just tries to make the pass on the 27, and that's just enough to send around. That's going to collect the 45, the 126, 72, 6, 37. There are a whole lot of cars involved in here, race fans, and not a whole lot of room to avoid. Let's actually take a look back here, looking at the rear view camera of Kenny Tripp here. Let's see if we can't see some of the chaos from the onboard camera on that number 12 entry. Gonna spin it around, and just cars everywhere. On a speedway as small as this, it's all that it takes to make several cars involved in a pretty hefty incident here. So trouble on lap number 1. We're going to see a couple of cars heading down onto pit lane. That's going to be the 26 of Johnny B, the 72 of Will Salamone, and the 45 of Mike Sukup, all heading down onto the pit lane here. Whether or not they have damage from that incident, or if it is just trying to do a little bit of big brain fuel strategy here tonight. We will have to see. Of course, these cars 30% fuel tanks, so fuel's going to be mandatory at quite literally every event that we travel to. And I believe 4 sets of tires are optional for these race cars, so going to be seeing a whole lot of passes made not on the speedway but down on pit lane here, race fans. And considering just how short this track is, actually, considering that that was only lap 1, so not every car was up to speed, and the best lap was only 18.7 seconds, you can imagine that pit stops can be very costly if you do them under green flag. Looks like the 17 of Casey Duncan is being sent to the rear of the field. Pretty heavy damage on that late model stock car, which is really unfortunate to see for that driver out of Seattle, because I believe he was involved in a very early wreck back at the Thompson Speedway as well that really dashed his chances back in round number 2. So we will have to keep an eye on Casey Duncan and see if he can muster anything up here despite that heavy damage on the side of that number 17 late model. But the caution is done and dealt with. The iRacing.com pace car is off the speedway. We're going to try this one again. Gerard Lawrence off to an amazing start, and Jason Branch not having much trouble himself either. A little bit of contact back further in the field, but for the most part everyone is sorting themselves out nice and neatly. A couple of drivers using the apron down there to try and get an edge on their opponents. I believe that was the 9 of Joshua Dubin. The 85 of Brandon Kiger also potentially doing that. Cars really trying to take any line that's available to them to try and make passes here, but we're only 10 laps in of a 225 lap race, so I would imagine some of these drivers really just trying to settle into a rhythm and be a little bit patient, because they've still got a whole lot of racing ahead of them left to do. More drivers trying to utilize the apron the best they can to try and make passes. You can see the 85 getting 2 tires down below the yellow line. It's not against the rules to be using the apron here tonight, though. If you make contact with a car entering or exiting pit lane while racing below the yellow line, you will, of course, be penalized. It looks like that's going to be the 37 of Art Hendren around. Definitely a whole lot of damage on that right front tire. Let's see if... oh, that's a whole lot of damage on both front tires, actually. Looking a little bit more like he's driving a modified here. Let's take a quick look back at what happened to Art Hendren here. We are still under the green flag as of right now, so no caution out on the speedway. It looks like Art Hendren just going to lose it, have a little bit of spin, and actually no major damage from that spin. That's just going to send him around. Art Hendren still in this race one way or another, currently being scored back in the 13th position. Back up in the front, leaders are just behind him, currently looking at P number 2 and P number 3 of Jason Branch and Jonathan Emerson. Both drivers only about 0.2 of a second between them. They are battling it out pretty early on. It looks like a couple of cars love tapping the wall there, no one going around, but that damage will add up. If you keep tapping that wall over and over and over again, that will add up. So gotta be a little bit wary on how much you're leaning on that outside wall. As the 23 of Jonathan Emerson is officially going to make the pass on Jason Branch. And just up ahead, Gerard Lawrence has already gotten around his first lapped car of Art Hendren in that 37. Only 18 laps in the books, and lap traffic already starting to become a factor for these late model drivers. We'll have to see how Emerson and Branch and Brancho manage to navigate their way around Hendren to try it and catch back up to this leader. A little bit further back, even more close battling. This is here for P number 8 between the 55 of Albert Hewins and the 85 of Brandon Kiger. Kiger did win his heat race back last week at the Thompson Speedway, but unfortunately ran into a little bit of a incident here tonight in his heat race. But still currently being scored in the top 10, so not a bad start for that 55 of Brandon Kiger. Up high on the speedway, you can see that 37 of Art Hendren starting to let the leaders by. He said, you know what? I've got damage on this race car. I do not have the pace to continue trying to battle for my lap. I'm just going to pull it up high and let the leaders go by and go from there. Very sportsmanly move by that number 37 entry. A little bit further up the field, currently looking at John Friley and Joe Campbell. John Friley driving that 126 Camel entry, the only driver in this race to be driving a triple-digit car, and I'll tell you what, that black and yellow Camel entry is looking very good out here on the speedway. Currently being the last car in the top 5, John Friley is having a very solid race so far this evening. A little bit further ahead, Jason Branch still getting a whole lot of pressure from behind. He has not been able to try and catch up to Jonathan Emerson whatsoever, but now he has Ryan Brancho just absolutely breathing down his neck. 25 laps already in the books, so clock is ticking slowly but surely. Just goes to show how quickly these laps can go by. We've already had a caution and we're already 26 laps in the books in only 8 minutes, so every lap being set right now is within the 16.1 to 16.4 range, to give you a reference about what sort of lap times are being turned around this speedway. So 225 might sound like a big number, but these laps are ticking off incredibly quickly, and if drivers aren't careful about their strategies and paying attention to what is going on in terms of the timing and scoring, it could potentially catch them off guard. And it's never a good feeling to be caught with your pants down when your spotter comes in and says there's only 25 laps left in the race. John Friley currently being involved in the closest battle on the speedway, getting a whole lot of pressure from behind from that 63 of Joe Campbell. Going to be trying a bit of a lower corner entry. Might have gotten a little bit loose there from how he dived it in, and that's going to allow Joe Campbell to start to make a little bit of ground up on him, and just in front of them, another incredibly close battle between Brancho and Branch. Brancho coming incredibly close to giving a little bit of a love tap to the rear end of that number 28, but he did manage to back off the throttle there. And that's going to be the 6 of Tommy Mitchell up high. It looks like Mitchell now being scored a lap down. Another driver that has a pretty beat up race car that got a little bit of damage early on in that race, and sure enough, right there, that 55 of Albert Hewins was up in the wall just a little bit in that Moonlight Speed entry. I'll tell you what, race fans, if you're not careful on your corner exits, it is incredibly easy to give that outside wall a little bit of a love tap. I know at one of my home tracks, the Darlington Speedway, we talked a lot about the Darlington stripe, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the real life racing world there's a little bit of a Langley stripe as well, because if you're really pushing your car and in the moment of being in a battle, it can be really hard to avoid scraping that outside wall. I imagine that little scrape of Mr. Albert Hewins is going to not be the last one we see this race. Speaking of, that 55 going to lose a spot to Mike Sukup. Mike Sukup going to make the pass down on the inside pretty handily, so might have been a little bit of trouble for Hewins there, but overall it does not look like there's any more damage on that 55, so he might have just had to go a little high in the corner and concede the position. Further up in the field, John Friley still receiving a whole lot of pressure from Joe Campbell just behind him in that number 63. Campbell has been right on Friley's bumper pretty much this entire race, and now starting to try and see if he can't make a pass down on the apron here. Gonna back off just a little bit coming through turns 3 and 4, but either way, still less than 0.3 of a second between these two late model stock cars. Incredibly close together, and looking again to try and make a pass, but Riley is just locking down that inside line a little bit too well for Campbell to try and make the pass. Because sure, it's one thing to dip 2 tires over that yellow line to try and make a pass, but outright completely going on the apron can be a death sentence if you are not incredibly lucky and incredibly careful. Sure enough, John Riley going to drift up to the high line just a little bit, and that's going to allow both the 63 of Joe Campbell and Joshua Dube to get around him, and if he's not careful, that 85 of Brandon Kiger might try and make a pass on him as well. And it looks like the 26 of Johnny B currently being scored 3 laps down, just letting the leaders by, not wanting to hold anyone up. When you're down 1 lap, it's one thing to be battling for position to try and get the lucky dog position and get your lap back should a caution come out. But when you're multiple laps down like that, the best play generally to be a sportsman and let the lead lap cars out of your way. Things are heating up in the front of this race. Gerard Lawrence still in control of things and having led every single lap, but he's got Jonathan Emerson finally caught back up to him and just breathing down his neck 0.2 of a second between these 2 race cars. Jonathan Emerson, I believe a rookie here in the series, making his first debut. And I'll tell you what, race fans, he is putting on a heck of a run in that number 23, and it looks like there's trouble. The number 2 of Ryan Brancheau is stopped up in turn number 2. He's going to get that car going again. But that's going to cost him just about every single position on the lead lap. And you can see there's a pretty hefty amount of damage to the right front of that number 2 late model stock car. So let's see if we can't take a really quick look back here and see what happened to Ryan Brancheau. Going out turn 4 here, 10 down the front stretch, got the 63 breathing down his neck. There's going to be a little bit of contact, and that alone is going to be all it takes to send the 2 around. No caution going to be coming out, though. He was able to get that late model stock car point back in the right direction, so we are not going to be throwing the caution for that one. So definitely a rough moment for Ryan Brancheau. We will have to see if this driver out of Toledo, Ohio, is able to make back some positions in the remainder of this race. Up in the front, that spin caused the field to have to check up just a little bit, and you can see Jason Branch trying to get down below the 63 of Joe Campbell, and going out of turn 4, he nearly had the nose up under him, but just not enough run off the corner. The number 9 is going to try the same thing on Branch. That's Joshua Dube trying to see if he can't make a move here on that inside line, going just a little bit down onto the apron, really trying to get any sort of lower that he can on this speedway, but it's just not working out. There is a bit of a fine line you have to tread where there is just a little bit of a perfect line that is the best for getting speed around the speedway. You go too far in either direction off of it, and you're going to start losing pace. And it looks like that's what's happening to some of these drivers, is they're just trying and trying and trying to get their nose down on the inside of the car in front of them. But in doing so, they're going off the line and losing a little bit of speed. But sure enough, Joshua Dube going to get around Jason Branch. That's going to knock Jason Branch back down into the 5th position, and John Friley also going to be looking to make the move, and looks like that 85 machine as well also going to be trying to get around the 28. That's going to knock him down all the way back to the 7th position in just a single lap. Sometimes that's just how it goes. The outside line on these racetracks can be a very difficult and a very tedious place to put yourself, except for a couple of select few tracks where riding effectively up against the wall is pretty much the preferred line. First track that comes to mind that's like that is the Irwindale Speedway, where actually riding down on the apron like you see these drivers doing here is actually a really bad idea. Back up in the front, Gerard Lawrence and Jonathan Emerson both sailing away with this race just a little bit. 0.2 of a second between these 2 race leaders, and then a 3-second gap between Emerson and P number 3 of Campbell. 56 laps in the books, going to be making it well, now 56 laps is in the books as we've officially crossed the line, so just about a fifth of the way through this race. Actually, a little bit off from a fifth, but effectively that's about where we're at. So far, only 2 drivers have come in for pit stops that weren't for damage, it looks like. And Mike Sukup, the only one of them that is being scored on the lead lap, back in the 8th position right now in that number 45 machine. Mike Sukup currently just riding around just a little bit, not too much pressure from behind at all. That car behind him, that 37 of Art Hendren, is a lap down, so not battling Sukup for position, so not a whole lot that Sukup has to worry about right now in that number 45 late model. Currently the last driver on the lead lap, that's the Moonlight Speed 55 of Albert Hewins. You can see a little bit of damage on the right side of that car. He has had a couple of scrapes against the outside wall around the speedway, but at this rate I expect just about every driver to be coming home with a little bit of paint scraped off the right side with how things are going. Up in the front, currently John Friley having to do, oh, trouble. He managed to keep it pointed forward, but that was Joshua Dube, and I wasn't quite sure who the other car was, but that was Joshua Dube going around and managing just barely to keep it pointed in the right direction. It looks like that is the 37 of Art Hendren. No, that's not the 37 of Art Hendren. That was Albert Hewins, potentially, that had a little bit of contact there with Joshua Dube. But he does have that late model stock car pointed in the right direction. He was pretty much 90 degrees sideways around on the speedway, so very fortunate for him that he's keeping it pointed in the right direction. That spin not going to affect the battle between Kiger and Friley, though. These two drivers bumper to bumper and have been bumper to bumper pretty much for the last 20 laps or so. It looks like Kiger going to see if he can't try and make a move down on the inside, and not going to work. Friley holding down that low line just a little bit too well for him to try and execute the pass, and so far does not look like we have seen the outside line really work for any of these drivers. Of course, still a whole lot of time left in this race, about give or take roughly 150, so still potential for the outside line to come in later on in the race, and it looks like there's trouble. Caution flag is out on the speedway. Looks like Joe Campbell in the 63 and potentially a couple of others were involved, and that's looking like, according to our truck, Joe Campbell and Ryan Bradshaw were involved in that incident. So let's see if we can't take a quick look back and see just what happened there. Currently looking at the 63 of Joe Campbell. A little bit of contact with that 2 car, and another little bit of a bump coming out of turn number 4, and that's going to cause the 2 to get loose, drift back up, a little bit of overcorrection, and that's going to send the 63 and the 2 spinning hard into the outside wall. That was a very rough impact for these 2 drivers. Let's bust out the chopper camera, get a top-down view of what just happened here between Joe Campbell and the number 2 machine of Ryan Bradshaw. The 2 got a bit loose from the 63, tapping him in the rear, tried to correct, and that was enough to spin him across the nose and send him into the outside wall. A very rough impact for Ryan Bradshaw, and pretty significant damage on that 63 as well. Looks like we will be seeing drivers coming down pit lane. Most of the cars on the lead lap look like they have either come down or are coming down to take most of their first pit stops of the evening. Mike Sukup having his second pit stop of the evening. So going to be a full tank of fuel for all these cars because they do not have fuel to the end right now, and Looking at the pit times, it looks like there were a couple of takers for 2 tires. Most notably, it looks like Brandon Kiger might have potentially taken maybe even 4 tires with how long that pit stop time was for that number 85. We'll have to see. Will Kiger manage to pull off anything on his alternate strategy? Because looking at the timing and scoring, his pit stop time was a little over double of that of every other car that pit under this caution, except for those, of course, that had damage from that wreck. So very interesting strategy by that number 85. We'll have to see how it works out for him when we end up going back green flag racing. Gerard Lawrence still up in the front of everything. It looks like the 12 car is going to be waved around the pace car. Now here in Palms, instead of having a single lucky dog, we actually have 3 lucky dogs every caution, so going to be seeing a couple of drivers get back up onto the lead lap depending on where they were when that caution happened. And of course, even if you are a lap down, you still need fuel one way or another. Looks like the 28 of Jason Branch going to be getting the wave around as well, and also the 2 of Ryan Brencho going to be getting his lap back as well. So those are your 3 lucky dog drivers. Let's see if any of them are going to be able to pull anything off now that the pit stops have cycled through and now that they've gotten their lap back. Lights still on the iRacing.com pace car, so we have at least one more time around the speedway, if not more. Might have been possible that the yellow flag had to be extended in order to make sure everyone got the correct wave arounds. So we will have to see if we get the lights out this time by. Sure enough, the lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, so we will be going green flag racing here again once we get this final time around the speedway. About 74 laps in the books here. Will be 74 laps completed when we go green flag racing again. And of course, I want to take a moment to give a big thank you to everyone tuning in, and definitely be sure to send your love to the Palms Late Model Series for putting on a very exciting show here. Green flag back up in the air. Gerard Lawrence still our race leader, and again making a great start on the speedway. A little bit hairy further throughout the field on that initial start there. We saw a couple of drivers nosing it down all the way down onto the apron. And the caution flag back out again. Looks like, for the most part, everyone has their cars pointing the right direction, but the truck is telling us that Casey Duncan and Ryan Brencho had an incident. So let's bust out the chopper cam and see if we can't take a quick look at what happened down on that initial restart. Currently looking at the 2 of Ryan Brencho here. 3 wide heading down into the corner. It looks like the trouble is actually for the 17 of Casey Duncan. So let's actually call it back, take a look at Casey Duncan and see what happened to the driver of that number 17 Superflow entry. And down into turn number 2, and a tap from the rear by the 63. That's going to send him down. Involve the 2 and the 26 of Johnny B. Also getting a little bit of damage off of that, but very rough restart there. You know what they say, race fans, cautions breed cautions, and that seems to prove true time and time again. A couple of drivers heading it down onto pit lane, ones that potentially did not take their stops on that previous caution, now going to be maybe reconsidering that and heading down there now after all. Sometimes when you see what the rest of the field is doing, they might have the right idea. Of course, not advocating for being conformist and doing something because you see everyone else doing it, but sometimes, just sometimes, you need to try and follow the pit strategy of the people around you. Of course, I say that, and I've seen races won by just having the most unorthodox pit strategies known to man, even if you're not necessarily doing or driving the fastest car. So I do have to give people credit for that, but sometimes you just need to go with the flow. So Gerard Lawrence still going to be our race leader. It looks like the 6 of Tommy Mitchell, the 2 of Ryan Brancheau, and the 17 of Casey Duncan will be the 3 lucky dogs for this caution. So these drivers will be getting their laps back here tonight, and that should put all 3 drivers back on the lead lap. Maybe not though. It actually looks like Mitchell and Duncan may still be a lap down, but Ryan Brancheau is back on the lead lap from that wave around. Light still on the iRacing.com pace car. Gonna be giving them a couple of more moments to make sure everything is sorted out nice and neat and orderly, but race control gonna be giving them the 1 to go this time by. And it looks like we will be having a single file restart here tonight, so we will gonna be trying things a little bit differently. Currently Gerard Lawrence in front of the pace car there, but he's gonna be told to slow it down and let the pace car by. Definitely good practice not to start in front of the pace car on a restart. Ask me how I know. Green flag up in the air. Gerard Lawrence gonna be sailing it down into turn number 1 as our race leader still, even after the pits cycled through. Just behind Joshua Dube all the way back up into the 2nd place. Currently up 9 positions, or make that 7 positions actually from where he qualified. So Joshua Dube on a heck of a run, and just behind him is his teammate in that number 23. That's going to be Jonathan Emerson. Couple of drivers down on pit road. That's going to be Kenny Tripp and Joe Campbell down on pit lane under this green flag. Looks like they both headed down there of their own volition, so no trouble for either of these drivers, but both of them have seriously messed up race cars. So needless to say, I'm not entirely surprised that they finally decided to head down there and see if they can't get anything done to fix up those cars, because with damage like that, could be a little bit of a safety hazard. Looks like Brandon Kiger having a bit of trouble having to go way up high, and that's going to allow Sukup and I believe John Friley to get around him. Now getting pressure behind from Hewins in Branch. Branch down 5 spots from where he qualified, so having a little bit of a rough evening, but still a whole lot of race left to go for these drivers to negotiate their way around each other and try and make a couple of positions back. Looks like we have a car off the track. That's the 37 of Art Hendren having a bit of trouble. He's got it back going again, and no caution going to be coming out for that little spot of difficulty for that number 37 driver. He's got to watch out though, because just a couple of seconds behind him is our race leaders barreling down into turn number 1. Gerard Lawrence still out front. Joshua Dube and Jonathan Emerson still your top 3 here. These 3 cars under a little bit of a blanket with each other, and then there's about a 1.5-second gap between the 23 and the 126 of John Friley back in the 4th position. So these 3 cars making up your top 3, and all of them very happy with how this race is going. All of them either in the position that they started in the case of Gerard Lawrence, our race leader, but Dube and Emerson both up several positions from where they qualified at earlier in this race. A bit further back, it looks like Albert Hewins might be having a bit of trouble. He just got passed by Jason Branch, and now he's starting to lose time on that 63 car, so potentially a little bit of an issue. And Art Hendren off the track again. He's again managed to keep it going, but definitely a little scary seeing that late model down in the grass. It looks like everything is a-okay for the driver of that number 37 machine, but he does have a bit of damage on that car from prior incidents, so that might be giving him a little bit of trouble with the stability of that late model stock car. Currently looking at the battle for the 5th position. Currently looking at Mike Sukup and Brandon Kiger just behind him. Kiger was just about at his bumper for a few moments there, but ended up backing off just a bit. Kiger in that 85, up 9 positions from where he qualified, so definitely looking to try and make that 10 or more and also get him up into the top 5. Kiger coming into this race is second in the points standing, so I'd imagine he's really trying to pick up any sort of spots that he can to try and get the edge on our current points leader of Kenny Tripp, who is currently down in the 15th position on pit road, about 5 laps behind everyone else. Actually, no, make that more like, call it probably closer to 15 actually. So Kenny Tripp not having the evening he wanted as our championship leader, and potentially seeing a change of hands in the standings after this race if he can't get that car back out on the speedway. But as we cross the stripe, we now officially have 100 laps in the books here tonight. Gerard Lawrence still our race leader after everything is said and done, so 100 trouble. Of course, I say that, and immediately there's a bit of contact between Lawrence and a lapped car. I believe that is Tommy Mitchell in that 6 machine. That little bit of an oopsie-daisy between the 27 and the 6, and that's going to cost Lawrence a whole lot of time. Going to allow Doob to catch up very handily in that number 9 machine and nearly make the pass, but not quite. So Lawrence still in control of this race after that little bit of a scare, but sometimes there's a bit of a mental aspect that goes into this racing as well, and if you get shaken out of your groove after a little bit of a bump like that, that can definitely throw off your game for the rest of the race. Of course, I know it's a little silly to be talking about getting thrown off your mojo and having bad vibes, but there's a whole mental battle going on here along with the actual physical battle of driving these late models around the track, and if you allow yourself to get distracted or to get anxious or to just generally get out of your zone, sometimes that alone can be enough to cost you positions, even if you are driving the fastest race car. A little bit further back, it looks like Brandon Kiger in that 85 has officially gone up 10 positions from where he qualified and gotten himself into the top 5. Still looking to see if he can't get around John Friley in that 126 camel entry, and has been having a whole lot of trouble with that for most of the race here, but still really trying to throw anything he can at that 126 and hope that something sticks. A little bit of a slightly higher entry through the corner there, but that's not going to cost him any speed. Not too high up on the track. I have been talking a lot about how the high line generally is not where you want to be on this speedway. It can be a very difficult place, a very frustrating place to have your car positioned, but when you're only going up like a foot or so, it's generally not that bad. It's when your entire car length off the racing line, that's when you start to have some serious problems with speed, because ultimately that is just a longer line around the speedway. Just in terms of distance, it is longer to go around the outside of the track than it is to go around the inside of the track. And in these cars, it's so heavily momentum based that getting a run off the high line can be incredibly difficult. So for the most part, not where you want to see cars be at. And it sounds like someone had a little bit of a scrape against the wall up in the front. It's like I said, probably everyone in this race will have scraped the wall at one point by virtue of how long the race is. It does not matter how great of a race car driver you are. It is inevitable that at one point you will make a minor mistake, and generally that minor mistake is placing your right side door against a concrete wall. Which, let's be serious here. Having your right side door against a concrete wall is definitely a whole lot better than having your engine in a concrete wall, or really any other part of the car. So all things considered, little minor scratches like that. Sucks to have to replace the paint after the race, but definitely not that big of a deal. Now, of course, outside of the simulated racing world, scraping against the wall could mean trouble, could potentially make your right side tires go flat. Thankfully, here on iRacing, that's not something that drivers have to really worry about. Tires do get damaged, so to speak, but they get damaged in the form of heat buildup. They don't actually risk going flat from, say, being punctured by debris or from having a scrape up against the wall. Now, if you break your suspension, that's a whole nother thing, but for the most part, not too much to worry about in terms of the potential flat tire unless you just run them for so long that they get so hot that they just fall apart. And sure enough, both these drivers still having some good tires on their late models. John Friley still up in the 4th position, doing everything he can to stop Brandon Kiger from advancing. These two cars are currently the closest battle on the speedway, 0.2 of a second between these two cars. John Friley really just trying his best to hug onto the inside line here and let things work themselves out one way or another. Brandon Kiger trying to see if he can't maybe get that nose down below the 126 on corner entry and corner exit, going a little bit lower into the corner, but actually trying to go higher that time by, maybe trying to cross him over a little bit, go up high on corner entry to go down low on corner exit and try and just get any sort of run on this 126 car. The theory is, for the most part, that, like I said earlier, that the outside line is the just objectively longer way to get around the track, and there's going to be a bit of a bump from the 85 to the 126 of John Friley. Brandon Kiger finally saying, you know what, I've spent enough time stuck behind you, it's about time to get out of the way and give me the position. And sure enough, Brandon Kiger now up to P number 4, and that's going to bump John Friley down a spot. And now he has to worry about Mike Sukup potentially catching up in that 45, but 2 seconds of difference between Sukup and Friley right now, so a little bit of breathing room for the 126, especially because there is a lapped car of Joe Campbell between himself and Sukup. A little bit further back, Jason Branch is actually starting to gain ground yet again, currently back in the 7th position in that America's Navy entry. Jason Branch is a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer, so of course we gotta thank that 28 driver for his service. Always great seeing drivers of all sorts of backgrounds out here on the Speedway on the iRacing.com platform. Up in the front, Gerard Lawrence getting pressure from behind from Joshua Dube because there's a lap car in front of them, and lap cars generally can mean a little bit of trouble for the race leaders. It can either be a blessing or a curse depending on how it works out. Looks like that 6-car Tommy Mitchell is going to go up high and just let the leaders by. Depending on the timing and the pacing of where the leaders are, sometimes the lap traffic can hold the leader up and cause the cars back in 2nd and 3rd to catch back up to the leader, but other times the leader can get around the lap car and then kind of use the lap car as a little bit of an extra line of defense between themselves and the car in P number 2, but Mr. Tommy Mitchell said, nope, I'm not doing any of that, I'm just getting out of the way and letting y'all run your race without me having any sort of interference in it. Tommy Mitchell, the lapped car in question in that number 6 Looney Tunes entry. Bit of damage on that late model stock car, currently being scored back in 11th. Currently 3 laps down, so bit of a rough evening for that number 6 driver, but it's not all done and dealt with yet. And trouble for Mike Sukup. Mike Sukup's around in the 45, and he's immediately going to take the tow down to pit lane. That was a very fast wreck, and he took that late model down to pit lane as soon as it came to a stop. So probably a bit of trouble and a bit of damage on that 45. Let's see if we can't look back here and see what happened to him. Coming here out of turn number 4 and heading down into turn number 1. And the car, oh, the engine expired on the 45. I did not see that one coming at all, race fans, but sure enough, the engine just blew up on that number 45 car, so no wonder he immediately took it down onto pit lane, because it just quite literally exploded on him. Let's see if we can't get an onboard view here and see what happened to that 45 of Mike Sukup. Coming across the start-finish line here, heading down into turn number 1, and just bang. No more engine for you. The fact that the car started spinning before the engine exploded almost makes me think that he downshifted and that's what caused the engine failure. If so, very interesting strategy to see out of the 45 trying to change gears through these corners. It's not unheard of, but also generally not a very popular choice, because unless you're doing it just picture perfectly, then it can result to a little bit of trouble like that. But of course, I could be mistaken. It could just be that his engine actually expired naturally and caused his steering to go a little bit crazy. But I don't know, the way that he spun before the engine exploded makes me think that it was from downshifting. Either way, that's going to be a game ender for the 45 of Mike Sukup. There is not really any chance that this team's pit crew is going to be able to repair an entire engine in the next 90 laps. Wave around starting to happen here. That looked like the... Nope, Jason Branch down on pit lane. That was the 2 of Ryan Brancheau coming back around. And we probably will be seeing 2 more cars getting their laps back, unless that already happened and we just missed it. Sure enough, there is the 17 of Casey Duncan coming back around. That's going to put Duncan 1 lap down, and also Johnny B and Tommy Mitchell both getting laps back. Both the drivers still several laps down from the rest of the cars, but regardless, every single wave around is a little bit of hope, because let's be real here, if something went wrong and say we had another caution on this restart, that would put Duncan back on the lead lap. That would put Mitchell only 1 lap down. And I mean, another lap of buffer for Johnny B is always something to be grateful for. So it may not seem like much when you're getting a wave around when you're multiple laps down, but if you have several back-to-back cautions, that all adds up very quickly and can be a real game changer when you're not having the race that you would like to be having. Light's going to go off on the iRacing.com pace car though, so going to be sending them around one more time before we fly the green flag again. Going to be 137 laps officially completed when we cross the line, so a little tiny bit over the halfway point, but not very much. Pace car's off. We're going to be going green flag racing yet again, and Joshua Dube is your new race leader. It looks like Gerard Lawrence actually lost a couple of positions on that pit stop, so it looks like he has officially lost the crown of leading every single lap this race, because Joshua Dube in that 9 car officially has led a lap here tonight. Side by side, heading down into turn number 1. That was Brandon Kiger and Jonathan Emerson heading down into there, and it looks like trouble for Art Hendren. He does have that car pointed back in the right direction, but very slow in that 37 car, so bit of trouble there on that restart, but he's got everything going the way he needs it to be going, and he's still in this race one way or another. Jonathan Emerson going to be losing a spot on the outside line there, and a scrape against the wall, and the caution flag is out. Not quite sure who that caution is for. We will have to go back to the moment of yellow and see if we can't take a look around and see what happened. Supposedly, maybe something happened to the 6th entry? That's going to be Tommy Mitchell. No, it looks like everything is all fine for Tommy Mitchell. The truck is saying they did not see anyone have any sort of incidents. So what we might have to do is break out the blimp camera and see if we can't see any cars stopped around the speedway. For the most part, it looks like everything is okay around the speedway for these drivers, so I'm not too sure what caused the caution to come out there, but sure enough, that's going to be our 5th caution of the evening, and it's like I just said, another caution going to be a massive boon to some of these drivers that are just below the lead lap. So when the waiver rounds come out, that's going to be putting Casey Duncan back on the lead lap, and Tommy Mitchell 1 lap away from being on the lead lap. Johnny B is down on pit lane, and it does look like he is actually on a strategy here. He is not down there for damage, so Johnny B also should be getting the wave around under this caution, should he be able to get back on the speedway in time. Lots of drivers heading down onto pit lane, though. Pretty much every driver that was down a lap, including a few that weren't down a lap, going to be taking extra fuel under this caution, really trying to make sure they can get the fuel mileage to the end that they are looking for tonight. 144 laps in the books, so still a long race ahead of these drivers, but now that we've crossed the halfway point, fuel mileage really might be all that it comes down here to. That is always a very big play. In another league that we broadcast here on this channel, and it looks like the 6 and the 26 and the 17 all going to be getting their laps back, just like we said. So Casey Duncan back on the lead lap. In another league that I broadcast for, we've seen all sorts of unorthodox fuel strategies, and one time we even saw a driver who was all set and primed to absolutely just dominate the race and take it home and win, run out of fuel on the final 3 laps. So fuel strategy is a major factor here, and I'm sure a lot of these drivers, especially on the lead lap, are going to be wanting to take fuel as often as they can just to ensure that they don't end up in a situation like that. That said, lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car for the 5th time this evening. Gerard Lawrence will be starting on the outside row here, but he is still up in the front, so we will have to see, will Lawrence be able to take his dominant race lead back? Green flag up in the air, an amazing start for Joshua Dube, so it's going to be no such luck for Lawrence. Lawrence, however, going to be able to get back down on the inside line and not have to worry about any of the cars behind him all that much. Further back in the field, just a little bit side by side still. Currently looking at Albert Hewins and Jason Branch. Albert Hewins in that 55, going to be conceding the position to the America's Navy car, and he's going to be trying to give a little bit of the bumper to John Friley and see if he can't get around that 126 Camel entry. Going to be backing it off through the corner there, not wanting to bump him again, maybe bumping him on accident a little bit that first time. That's also going to cause Albert Hewins to back off a bit. That said, another bump between Branch and Friley. That's going to move Friley up the speedway, and Branch is going to make the pass. Along with that, Hewins also side by side with Tandy, and he's going to make the pass on Tandy as well. Tandy also going to be getting pressure behind from the 63. The 63 of Joe Campbell is not on the same lap as John Friley, so this pass is not for position. Friley, you can see, getting a little bit loose off the corner there from a little bit of side-by-side contact. Really just trying to figure out what the heck is going on, because he had a very rough start on that restart there. We're falling back several positions, now all the way back in 7th and getting pressure from behind by Ryan Brancheau in that number 2 machine. A little bit further up ahead, Jason Branch also starting to have to worry about the 55 of Albert Hewins, but Hewins going to get loose off the corner and have to completely back out of the gas to save the car from spinning. still a very scary situation for that 55, and major props to him for managing to keep that car pointed in the right direction, because if it was in my hands, race fans, it probably would have ended up in the pit lane entry wall. The battle up for the front, still under a blanket, and this time there's 4 cars in it. That's going to be Joshua Dube, Gerard Lawrence, Brandon Kiger, and Jonathan Emerson. Brandon Kiger is having a heck of a run this evening in that number 85 machine, up 12 positions from where he started. He won last week's heat race, and he finished in the top 3 last week. And now he's looking to try and solidify his place on the podium here again tonight. If not, pick up another win and knock Kenny Tripp off the top of the championship standings. But he's got to get up into the lead of this race first in that number 85 machine, and he certainly seems to have the pace to do it. That time by, the top 4 were all within 4 thousandths of a second of each other, but Emerson actually set the fastest lap of all people, even though he does seem to be losing a little bit of a time on our race leaders. Sure enough, that time by, Emerson did have a bit of a slower lap than our race leaders, but regardless, these 4 cars still under a blanket, even with 159 laps already turned out of 225. Very long race for some of these drivers, and they are still giving it their all, even after a whole 53 minutes of driving non-stop have been completed. A little bit further back, Albert Hewen still trying to get around that America's Navy entry, really just trying to figure out any sort of way to get his nose down below him. Let's take a look here with the chopper cam. You can see that 55 backing off a little bit there, but trying to take a lower entry on the 28, and that's allowing him to make up time. But once he gets those tires down on the apron, while it is the shorter way around the speedway, he is bleeding a little bit of time just from how hard he's having to turn it. Either way, really putting on some pretty decent speed, and that time by, Albert Hewens, all the way back in the 6th position, set an identical time to our race leader of Joshua Dube. So all these cars, despite being somewhat spread out around the speedway, are still incredibly close to each other on time, even this far into the race. That said, we did recently have a pit stop, so it is conceivable that a lot of drivers took tires, but it's still very impressive to see everyone setting such similar lap times to each other, even this far into the race. And gonna be giving a little bit of tap to the back of Jason Branch there. Not enough to move Branch up the speedway and make a pass on him, but just a little bit of a warning to let him know that, hey, my 55 Moonlight speed entry is right behind you, buddy, and I'd kind of appreciate it if you let me be up in the top 5. After all, I am driving the 55 car. Might as well let me in the top 5, you know? Things are getting even closer up in the front. These 3 cars nearly bumper to bumper through turn number 4 there. Possible that Dube had a little bit of a checkup there, but everyone's still going in the right direction. Just a whole lot of bumping and banging going on between these race cars. Currently looking back at Jonathan Emerson's number 23 machine, trying to figure out how to get around the 85 and get himself back up into the podium. His teammate up in the 9 machine is the race leader, so if anything, I'd imagine Emerson's wanting to try and get around Lawrence and Kiger so he can help his teammate out and try and make sure that their team takes home a win one way or another. But Gerard Lawrence has dominated most of this race, and only after that most recent pit stop lost the lead to Kiger, or to Dube. But Kiger is going to be diving it down real low, all the way down onto the pit entry to try and get around Gerard Lawrence. And with lap cars all over the track here, things are getting pretty spicy. That 37 and that 6 car, both cars a lap down. Both were battling it out, and both quickly realized, oh crap, the leaders are right behind us, we need to get out of their way. And sure enough, they all managed to do it without any sort of a hitch, but very scary for everyone involved there. If anyone had their nerves get a little bit too close to the sweet spot, or any sort of errant twitch could have completely screwed things up, but everyone managing to keep things going pretty cleanly. Another lapped car going to be letting our leaders by. That was the number 26 of Johnny B. Johnny B 4 laps down from Timmy Mitchell, so the 26 and the 6 are not battling for position either, but both of them not on the lead lap here tonight. The battle for the lead still currently the closest battle on the speedway here tonight. Joshua Dube scoring lap after lap here in the lead. Of course, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many laps you've led if you're not actually the person who takes it home on the 225th lap. But either way, having a clean racetrack up in front of you with no cars you have to go around or worry about is a very great feeling. And it's like I said about the whole mental game here. There's just as many things that can really be inspiring as there are things that can be demoralizing. And Joshua Dube currently feeling incredibly good right now. Sure, he has an incredibly fast competitor behind him in the form of Gerard Lawrence and Brandon Kiger, but at the same time, if he keeps up the momentum that he's got going, he will be the championship points leader heading into next week's event. So a whole lot of pressure, but pressure in a good way, leaning on that number 9 car of Joshua Dube. A little bit further back, Albert Hewins in that 55, trying to see if he can't catch back up to Ryan Brancho. Ryan Brancho managed to get the pass on him a little while ago, and ever since then, just been trying to see if he can't figure out a way to make it back. The 6 car going to get another scrape on the outside wall. That is Tommy Mitchell having a little bit of trouble just trying to get out of the way of the lead lap cars and maybe getting out of the way a little bit too well. You can see the right front tire on that number 6 almost completely jutting out of the bodywork, looking a little bit like the cars we see in the Whetten modified tour. But I'm pretty sure that car would not pass inspection for the Whetten mods, even if it is really embracing the spirit of open-wheeled racing here tonight in that number 6 Looney Tunes entry. Further up track, Jason Branch having to start to look in his rearview mirror, because who is that right behind him? That is John Friley, trying to make a pass and get back up into the top 5. I'd say that 5th place so far has been one of the most tightly contested positions on the track, second only to that of the lead. Because really, a lot of people, when they write home about the race, they think, okay, I got a top 5. That officially means that I had a good race. So we do see a lot of drivers really duking it out to try and get into the top 5. Of course, a podium, always great to be on as well. But a top 5 is really where you start to feel good about just how well you managed to finish. So John Friley really trying to get around that number 28 machine, especially after finishing last week's race outside of the top 10 in that number 126 Camel late model. Brandon Kiger and Jonathan Emerson have started to lose the 2 leader cars just a little bit, but they certainly are not losing each other whatsoever. Both cars nose to bumper for almost an entire lap there. Emerson currently is in the position from where he qualified, so Emerson, all things considered, not been having too exciting of a race, and when you get a good qualifying position, sometimes that's just the best way for it to be. It's always great to get a win, but sometimes it's better to just finish where you started and not have to worry about fluctuating all over the timing and scoring, because that just creates its own sort of pressure weighing down on that driver of the number 23 machine. Very nearly making contact with the rear end of Brandon Kiger there, but oh, and a hard scrape as well. That's a little bit of a love tap to the outside wall. It's like I said, race fans, I expect every driver to come out of this race with a scrape against the outside wall, and if drivers in the top 5 are doing it, I think just about anyone can do it. And loose through the corner for Brancho. Brancho got passed up by John Friley. Or no, never mind that. John Friley still in front of Ryan Brancho. Jason Branch still managing to hold off John Friley for the top 5 here tonight. But these 3 cars suddenly under a blanket when they were fairly spread out not even 5 laps ago. John Friley still riding back in the 6th position, trying to get his way back up into the top 5 where he was earlier in this race, but just over about 30 laps to go, so the clock definitely is ticking for these late model stock car drivers. The time for being patient and careful is over. If you want to make moves, you're gonna have to do it soon, because there's not a whole lot of time left, and if this race goes green, then that is going to come a whole lot faster than you can realize sometimes. Drivers still setting 16.5-second laps around this speedway despite being 194 laps in. Only 0.4 of a second off of the fastest lap of the race, which was a 16 flat. So laps ticking by very, very quickly, and everyone's still just trying to negotiate for any positions that they can as we come into the final winding hours of this race. Lap traffic playing a factor up in the front. Joshua Dube and Gerard Lawrence still right up against each other. Lawrence trying to take back the win after leading the most laps of this race and then unfortunately losing a position to Dube on a pit stop. Dube still has a very fast race car though, and last time by both drivers set an identical lap time of 16.58. That time by, again, incredibly similar lap times. Gerard Lawrence was actually slightly faster last time by in that number 27 machine, so whole lot of pressure on that number 9 car knowing that the car behind you is setting faster lap times than you, but the 27 got loose off the corner. Bit of a big wiggle coming down the front stretch that is going to cost him a little bit of time and allow Brandon Kiger and Jonathan Emerson to catch back up to him. That number 17 of Casey Duncan staying up high to let the leaders by, but having a car to your outside, that can cause a little bit of trouble and throw you off your line a little bit, but for the most part, everyone still seems to be going pretty well here tonight. These top 4 still all under a blanket. Jonathan Emerson actually starting to fall back a little bit in that 23, but still no laughing matter as we do cross the line and now have 24 laps to go here tonight. 200 laps officially have been completed around the Langley Speedway. Jonathan Emerson back in the 4th position, trying his best to catch back up to Brandon Kiger and put himself back on the podium. Looks like the 55 of Albert Hewen is going to come down onto pit lane. So Albert Hewen's potentially needing fuel, a little bit off on his pit strategy, but he is currently scored back in the 9th position. That pit stop is going to put him a lap down. Another lap down, actually, excuse me. He was already a lap down along with Casey Duncan. So another lap down for Albert Hewins, but still potential for more cautions to come out and get Hewins and Duncan back on the lead lap, depending on how this race decides to play out. The 9 of 27 really just having to contend with lap traffic now. That is the number 37 of Art Hendren just in front of them. Art been having a little bit of trouble this race. Going to go up high and let the leaders by. So far, lap cars have not affected the race lead all that very much, but still a whole lot of consideration to do. And that's the 2 car. That's going to be Ryan Brancho coming down to pit lane as well, going to be taking another splash of fuel before the end of the race. That is actually going to be Ryan Brancho's 7th pit stop of this race, which just goes to show how much strategy and consideration has to go into some of these stops, because we've seen a pretty wide variety in pit strategies here. Currently, our race leaders, Joshua Dube, Gerard Lawrence, Brandon Kiger, Jonathan Emerson, have all only pit 2 times, whereas some of the cars out on the speedway have pit 5, 4, 3, and of course Ryan Brancheau with the most of 7 pit stops this evening. Further back in the field, side by side for Albert Hewins and Ryan Brancheau, these drivers are a lap down, but they are battling for position here, that 55 and that 2 car. Brancheau going to successfully make the pass on Albert Hewins. Both cars, the only cars down 2 laps, so these 2 cars are the only cars battling on this lap with one another. Then Mitchell's going to be an extra lap behind them, followed by Campbell and Johnny B. Currently only 6 cars left on the lead lap as we cross the line with 14 laps to go. If a caution came out here, it would be between Dube, Lawrence, Kiger, Emerson, Branch, and Friley, as well as Duncan, as he would be put back on the lead lap should a caution come out, unless Duncan is involved in the caution. So 6 make that potentially 7 cars that could still vie for the race win, depending on how these remaining 13 laps end up going. But right now, it's pretty solidly between Dube and Lawrence. These 2 cars still within half a second of each other, almost nearly 0.3 of a second within each other, but it looks like Gerard Lawrence starting to lose pace just a little bit. Last time by, Joshua Dube did set a faster lap time, only by 0.5 of a second, but still, or 0.005 of a second, excuse me, but still, Joshua Dube very slowly but surely starting to pull away from Lawrence. As we come around the speedway, once again going to be the big double high fives up in the air. 10 more laps around the Langley Speedway. Joshua Dube starting to pull away from Lawrence. If Dube is good on fuel, then there is a chance that he might just have this. But this isn't just the Dube and Lawrence show. There's still 14 cars still out on the racing surface, and it only takes one of them to have one little mistake to bring the caution out and bunch the field back up. So Dube absolutely cannot breathe a sigh of relief yet. He still has to be on his absolute A game until this race is over. But our top 6 are going to be getting sorted out. Green flag pit stops underway. Our top 6 all needing more fuel. Everyone's still out except for Jason Branch. And scratch that, it looks like Jason Branch will be coming down this time by. So every single lead lap car has officially just pit for fuel, and Lawrence is actually going to be the leader after that pit stop. Lawrence did have a 2-second faster pit stop than Joshua Dube, and that pit stop could very well have made all of the difference. Going to be 6 to go this time by. Lawrence is technically still being scored back on pit lane, even though he very much is not on pit lane. Lawrence is our race leader here tonight. Coming around the track yet again, going to be making it 5 to go here. 2 seconds between Lawrence and Dube here tonight. Dube has a whole lot of ground to make up if he wants to get back in this race lead. It's kind of crazy how that works out, though. A pit stop is what caused Lawrence to lose the lead to Dube for the middle portion of this race, and then a pit stop is going to allow Lawrence to get back into the lead of this one. That said, trouble. Ryan Brancheau is off the track. He's going to be able to get it back on. 3 laps to go. Brancheau has it sorted out, so no caution going to come out. Gerard Lawrence, 2 seconds between himself and Dube. 3 laps to go. Going to be making it 2 as he crosses the line. A whole 2.3 seconds between our race leader and Dube right now. I do want to reiterate that Lawrence is not on pit road anymore. He is our race leader right now. Just a little bit of an issue with his transponder. White flag up in the air, though. Casey Duncan's going to be going off track. Trouble for the 17. He's getting it spun back around, back out onto the raceway, and down into turn 3, coming out of turn 4. And Gerard Lawrence is going to take home the checkered flag, followed by Joshua Dube and Brandon Kiger back in P number 3. What a race roll. It came down somewhat to pit strategy, and sometimes that makes all the difference. This 225 lap race, one of the longer races on the calendar, and sometimes just outsmarting your opponent can make all the difference, even if you don't necessarily outdrive them. But saying that, Gerard Lawrence had an incredibly fast race car, quite literally all race here tonight. We are going to get a bit of a celebratory burnout out of that 27 machine. Gonna have to slam on the brakes as to not wreck his race car, but he has gotten it down into victory lane. So let's see if we can't call up Mr. Gerard Lawrence and give him a quick talking to for that heck of a race. We are still waiting just a second for everyone to pick up the radio. Fortunately, as much as I would love to just walk down there and give them an interview in person, this is still the iRacing.com simulator in not real life. Alrighty, well, it looks like we might be doing this a bit in reverse order because we haven't gotten anyone else to pick up the radio. Oh, never mind, there we go. There is Gerard. So we will actually be doing this in correct order after all. Good evening, Mr. Lawrence. You picked up the win here tonight after a very long 225 lap race. How are you feeling after that?
Um, just happy to get it done.
Yeah, it was a very long race, and it seems part of it came down to fuel strategy. Both passes for the lead happened on pit lane. Are you thinking that Uh, well, did you cook up this fuel strategy in practice? Did you have something already ready coming into this, or did you just go with the flow of the race and it worked out for you?
A little bit of both, honestly. I knew when we came off of pit road on that last stop that it was going to be close on fuel, so I just stayed as close as I could to that 9 car and kept pressure on him and tried to keep him burning as much fuel as possible.
Yeah, well, it certainly managed to work out for you. Looks like coming into this race, you were scored back in the third position in the championship standing, so a win might just be enough to bump you up above Brandon Kiger here tonight. You got any particular thoughts or feelings about heading into the USA International next week?
Nothing specific. I'm happy because the first 2 races of the season were probably my worst 2 tracks on the schedule. So going into the rest, I feel certainly pretty confident.
Good deal. Well, I'm certainly excited to see what you have in store for us for the rest of the season. Before I send you off, though, the microphone is all yours, Mr. Lawrence. Is there anyone you'd like to thank for getting this number 27 here in Victory Lane?
The only person I'd have to thank is my girlfriend Hazel for not yelling at me for iRacing all night.
Good deal. Well, you heard it here first, Hazel. Thank you for not yelling at Mr. Lawrence and allowing him to take home the win here tonight.
Thank you very much, sir.
And heading back to our second place finisher, Mr. Joshua Dube, you taking it home, P number 2. Definitely a bit of a sore one after leading so many laps this race. Do you reckon if anything played out any sort of differently, you could have had what it takes to get this race win?
Yeah, I'm kicking myself in the rear. I definitely had that. I mean, me and Joao were pretty equal the whole race, but there's no way he was going to get around me. I screwed myself. I'm racing in VR, and I was too late checking off my fuel. stop fueling. So I took way too much fuel, and that's where he got me.
Yeah, sometimes that's all it comes down to. Definitely very unfortunate that that happened, but either way, you put on a heck of a run here tonight and being back in the fourth place in the championship standings coming into this race. This is definitely another really solid finish for you and potentially even enough to bump you up a position on the standings. Do
Yeah, I
you
just need a little bit of luck in this league. I've been fast every week, very fast. The luck has not been there.
Well, we've still got plenty of races left for the luck to turn around. You got any particular concerns or opinions about heading into USA International next week?
I love that track. I believe that me and Kenny will run up front most of that race too.
Sounds like a good plan. I certainly look forward to seeing y'all coming out next week. But before I send you off, is there anyone you'd like to thank on the side of that number 9 machine for getting you here back in the second position?
Yeah, we have quite a few sponsors. Main Mobile Truck Service, Hail Sailor, Paul the Builder, Cage, Sundown Construction, and Cooley's Commercial Tire. And I will thank Matt and the group for putting this on. They run a great league, and your broadcast is awesome too. So thank you all you guys.
Well, thank you for coming out, Joshua, and I look forward to seeing y'all running next week.
10-4, man. We'll be here. Thanks.
And finally, rounding out your field here tonight, or well, better said, your podium here tonight, Mr. Brandon Kiger. I believe I spoke to you last week. How are you feeling now that you've got 225 laps under your belt tonight?
Ah, just a little frustrated with ourselves here. We put ourselves behind the 8 ball from the get go, getting started in the back. I think we started 15th, and we had my tires checked. I thought I had them checked off there, and I had all of them checked, so I was changing the right sides. And I think if I would have changed right sides and took fuel, I might would have had something out of the pits to maybe win. I don't know. At least finish second. I think I was close enough to them there on the pit strategy. It would have worked out, but it didn't.
Yeah, pit strategy seems to be the deciding factor for a lot of cars here tonight, but regardless, you put on a heck of a run and were by far the most improved driver, picking up 12 positions throughout the duration of that race. So that's certainly no laughing matter, and you're still up in P number 2 in the championship standings coming into this race, so another podium is definitely nothing to scoff at heading into next week.
Yeah, I'm just we're just trying to stay consistent. Top threes, top fives, that's all we shoot for. We really want to win, but if you stay consistent all season, it's going to be hard to beat you. I mean, consistency pays off. Winning races pays off, but we just will be there at number one in championship at the end of the year.
Well, we still got a long season ahead of us, but with how you've been performing so far, I definitely would not be surprised to be seeing you contend in there at the end of the season. But before we head into next week, you got any particular thoughts or feelings about heading into the USA International Speedway?
Um, I like USA. It's gonna be another tough race. It's one of our better tracks. Have a lot of laps there. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody has a lot of laps there. Everybody's going to be good and hard to beat. We'll just play it by how it goes and let the race come to us, hopefully.
That sounds like a good plan. I look forward to seeing you out there next week. But before I send you off for the evening, you got anyone on the side of that number 85 machine you'd like to thank for getting you another podium tonight?
Oh, not really. We just, I just, not really nobody but myself again. I just try to put this on myself. My spotter was out this week, so hopefully he'll be back next week to help us out. But other than that, I just appreciate Matt and all them putting us on in your broadcast. I really do enjoy it.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Brandon, and I look forward to seeing y'all competing next week.
Appreciate it.
And there you go, race fans. Your top 3 finishers here tonight, Mr. Gerard Lawrence, Joshua Dube, and Brandon Kiger here tonight. But before we send you off, let's go take a look at our official, well, unofficial race results, but might as well be official, for the evening coming home in P number 1. Going to be our race winner here tonight. Going to be Mr. Gerard Lawrence in that 27, followed by Joshua Dube in the 9 and Brandon Kiger in the 85, the 3 drivers we just got finished speaking to. Back in the 4th place, going to be Jonathan Emerson in that number 23 car, followed by Jason Branch in the 28 in 5th. Back in 6th place, going to be Casey Duncan in the 17, getting a much needed top 10 finish after a very difficult start back at the Thompson Speedway last week. Back in 7th, going to be John Friley in the 126, followed by Albert Hewins in the 55, back in 8th position. 9th place going to go to Ryan Branchot in the 2, followed by Timmy Mitchell in the 6 in the number 10. Tommy Mitchell, in the 6 in 10th position. 11th going to go back to Joe Campbell in the 63, followed by Johnny B in the 26, back in 12th. 13th going to go to Art Hendren in the 37, followed by Mike Sukup in the 45, back in 14th. 15th going to go to Kenny Tripp in the number 12, and finally rounding out the field here tonight back in the number 72 machine, going to be Will Salamone. But that's just about all we got for y'all here tonight at the Langley Speedway. Next week, same day, same time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will be heading out to the USA International Speedway for 150 laps. Scratch that. Actually, we are off next week, and then the week after that, we are back at USA International Speedway. So we are off on Wednesday the 23rd for the holidays because of Thanksgiving that week. And then we'll be back for all your regularly scheduled racing action on Wednesday the 30th for 150 laps at the USA International Speedway. So thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks for round number 4 of the season. Thank you all for coming out, race fans, and I hope you have a great evening.